My name's Grant Whitaker, 34, general contractor, the kind of guy who lives by calendars, tool belts, and promises. When I met Marissa Vale at a community fundraiser 2 summers ago, she was a freelance photographer with ink on her fingers and light in her eyes. She spoke with her hands, laughed with her whole face, and said she loved how my life ran on straight lines. I chase moments, she told me. You build rooms for them to live in. I fell for that sentence like a man misses a stare in the dark. We moved fast. 6 months in, her toothbrush lived next to mine. She'd edit photos at the kitchen island while I measured lumber takeoffs at the dining table. Mornings smelled like dark roast and sawdust. Nights like the shampoo she loved and the lemon oil I used on my tools. Our routines braided without effort. On Mondays, I left before dawn for sights. On Tuesdays, she booked portraits in parks and storefronts. Wednesdays we tried new recipes because she said midweek needed color. We made lists, caterers, venues, vows neither of us had written yet. I wasn't flashy about the proposal. Steak in a cast iron pan, a decent red wine, ring box tucked by the oven mitts. She said yes before I finished the question, laughing and crying against my shoulder. We circled a spring date on the fridge and took a photo of our own hands because that's what you do when the future feels certain. Then certainty blinked. It started small. Phone face down at dinner. Quick little smiles she didn't share with me. A rescheduled cake tasting because a client moved up a chute. I went solo, sent her photos of frosting swirls with dumb captions, got back a heart emoji, and you're the best. I knew I was. But I also knew I wasn't the only thing lighting up her screen. My best friend Noah Briggs caught the signs before I said a word. You okay? He asked one Thursday, watching her fire off replies while we all played cards. When Marissa stepped outside to take a call, he lowered his voice. That's not work texting, man. That's blush and butterflies texting. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted the old story, the one where you misread the room and apologize, where trust is a faucet you forgot to turn all the way off. But trust isn't a faucet. It's the pipes behind the walls. When those start rattling, you listen. I listen harder. Tiny things grew teeth. She dodged a long weekend I suggested by saying her sister Megan pulled a muscle and needed help moving furniture. Again. She posted sunset photos from a neighborhood nowhere near Megan's house. She came home late, smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine, and hugged me with her chin on my shoulder the way you do when you need comfort from someone you're keeping a secret from. We went to dinner with friends, and someone posed a light question. If you could relive any year of your life? People tossed out travel, high school, road trips. Marissa said, too quickly, my junior year. With Austin. She laughed, then tucked a stray hair behind her ear. Kidding, she added softer. Sort of. I rinsed plates that night with my mind stuck in a dorm room I'd never seen. I told myself it was nostalgia. Everyone softens old stories at the edges. Still, when her phone buzzed after midnight and she slid it under her pillow, I stared at the ceiling fan and counted rotations like a man waiting for a storm to hit his roof. The storm arrived on a Sunday, quiet as snowfall. She stood in the doorway while I stirred sauce, hands folded like she was about to deliver a speech. Grant, can we talk? I set down the spoon and leaned against the counter. We're talking. I've been thinking about us, she said, breath shallow. And about Austin Drake. The name landed like a nail, finding the last swing of a hammer. I never really closed that door, she continued. We ended in college, and it was messy, and sometimes I still wonder if he was the one. I'm not saying I want to leave you. She swallowed. I need a little time. A few weeks to clear my head. No pressure. No arguing. Time for what? I asked, though I already knew. To make sure, she said. About us. I took a long drink of water to keep from saying something I'd regret. And while you figure out whether I'm your second choice, I said evenly, what do? Stand by the window and watch for brake lights. That's not fair, she whispered, eyes wet. I'm trying to be honest so we don't blow up later. You try and keep every door open at once, I said. That's not honesty. That's hedging. Silence spread between us. Wide, cold, impossible to cross without getting wet. Finally, I nodded. All right. Her shoulders fell with relief. Thank you. I'll stay at Megan's. I'll call you soon. She hugged me, and I let her. An hour later, the door shut. A different hour opened. I picked up my phone and started building a plan. People think revenge requires volume. That payback has to echo. I build houses. I know better. The strongest structures are quiet, load-bearing decisions hidden behind clean paint. If Marissa wanted a little time, I would give her exactly that, and exactly what time does when it's running out. First, the wedding machine. I called the vineyard, canceled the reservation, lost some of the deposit, didn't care. Caterer, canceled. Florist, canceled. Photographer, ironically, one of Marissa's mentors, offered a waiver fee if we talked it through. I thanked her and declined. By sundown, every door Marissa assumed would stay on its hinges was closed and latched. Second, money. Our joint credit card, cleared and frozen. My primary accounts, passwords changed, her access removed. The lease sat in my name. I filed early termination, ate the fee, and declined to renew. I hired a small moving crew I trusted, guys who'd framed half my projects, and we boxed Marissa's things with the care you give a museum exhibit. Labeled, listed, taped. Camera gear. Sweater she loved. The framed print she took of my hands lacing her hiking boots, which I'd once thought might hang in our living room for a decade. Everything stacked in one corner with an inventory sheet on top. Third, a new address. 6-month lease, furnished, across town, a view of the river if I leaned from the balcony. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and no one had ever texted anyone old on that couch. Last, the story. When a person sits on two chairs, they eventually fall between them. I didn't intend to push, but I did intend to make sure I wasn't the cushion. I drafted a single message to both families and close friends. Polite, factual, no details. Marissa and I are not moving forward with our wedding. We'll appreciate privacy as we navigate this. I sent it the night I turned in the keys. The next morning, Marissa texted, "Can we talk?" "I think I'm ready." I replied, "Come by night." I waited in the half-empty apartment that had been our home, leaning against the counter. The stack of boxes looked like a skyline of things we used to be. The folder on the counter held receipts from every cancellation, the lease termination, and a signed delivery slip for her belongings. She stepped in, eyes adjusting to the space that had forgotten her shape. "What happened here?" "I made a few changes," I said. "You canceled everything?" She scanned the paperwork, grief turning to frustration. "Why would you do that, Grant?" "I needed a short break. I told you it wouldn't take long." "You asked for space," I said, voice calm. "I gave you space. You also asked for honesty. Here's mine. I won't be an understudy in my own life." Her face softened. "Austin isn't who I remembered. It was," she shook her head. "It was a mistake. I want us. I want to fix this." "You didn't trip on a rug," I said. "You opened a door, stepped through, and expected me to hold it from this side." I slid the inventory sheet toward her. "Your things are here. I'll have them delivered if you prefer." She stared at the list like it might rearrange itself. "So that's it. You're done." "That's it," I said, because sometimes mercy looks like a period. She left with a box and tears. 3 days later, my mother called to scold me for breaking a good woman's heart. Apparently Marissa's mom had opinions, and Instagram had captions. Some people can't handle real love. There were no tags, but everybody knew. I didn't clap back. I didn't subtweet. I hit send once. The group message I drafted, the one that said what needed saying and nothing else. Then I blocked Marissa everywhere. Calls, texts, email. Not a punishment, a perimeter. Gossip has a half-life. If you stop feeding it, it dims. My cousin Dylan cornered me at the hardware store and said he heard I bailed out of nowhere. I met his eyes and said, "She asked for time to see if her ex was the one." I gave her exactly what she asked for. He didn't have much to say after that. I moved, slept like a man who'd put down a heavy ladder, and threw myself at work. I took jobs I turned down, paid attention to details I've been too in love to notice. Routine sharpened. Wake at 6. Run the river path. Coffee in a travel mug. On site by 7:30. Eat something green at lunch instead of whatever the guys grab from a truck. Text Noah a picture of progress at dusk, because some friendships are held together by two middle-aged men sending each other photos of straight lines. A month in, Marissa appeared outside my new building because someone had slipped my address. She asked for 5 minutes with the pleading dignity of someone used to getting it. I gave her 3. She said she'd made a mistake. I said I believed her and that it didn't change anything. She cried quietly, nodded like a student who understands the lesson too late, and walked away. The door clicked. It sounded small. It wasn't. That might have been the end. No loud fireworks, just a dimming sky. If not for what happened next. Not her coming back. Her revenge. I didn't know Austin Drake. I knew of him. Former campus radio guy turned pop-up marketing consultant. All charm and sleeve-rolled confidence. He'd been the what-if in Marissa's junior year and the ghost in our present tense. Apparently, he didn't like being a ghost. A week after Marissa's last doorstep visit, one of my subcontractors called. Hey boss, weird thing. We got an email from a client saying our company mishandles permits and underpays guys. The sender said they were tipped off by a source close to your personal life. The accusations were nonsense. We keep clean books and pay fair, but rumors are glue. Annoying, especially when they land on your shoes at work. Later that day, a venue manager I'd built a deck for emailed to check in because someone had hinted I left my fiancée with unpaid bills and a habit of walking away from commitments. I could see the sentence Austin wrote, and the sentence Marissa might have whispered. That was their revenge, smudging my name. Nothing dramatic. Just enough shade to make decent people squint. I didn't rage. I documented. Dates. Times. Subject lines. Screenshots of messages clients forwarded me. A careful timeline that showed the cancellations I'd paid for and the delivery receipt of Marissa's boxes, signed in ink by her sister. I asked my crew if anyone else had received odd outreach. 2 had. I looped in my attorney, Claire Morton, a practical woman who eats paper trails for breakfast. Don't swing, she said. Build. We built. Claire drafted a direct, narrowly tailored letter. Firm, polite, non-theatrical, sent to both Marissa and Austin. It included the timeline, the receipts, and a note that said, in essence, we see what you're doing. It's false. Knock it off. It also said, we won't hesitate to defend our name. She filed a business defamation notice with the platforms hosting the anonymous posts, attaching evidence. My team kept working. My phone stayed quiet. But I wasn't interested only in stopping the smear. I was interested in finishing my side of the story. Not with gossip. With light. I booked a small video session with Lila, a wedding videographer who owed me a favor after I rebuilt a collapsing porch on a rush schedule. We sat in her studio against a plain background. I wore a clean work shirt with my name stitched over the pocket. The video was 2 minutes long and never said Marissa's name. I looked into the camera and said the truth in plain American. I called off a wedding because I won't ask anyone to marry me while they're testing other doors. I don't know the internet details. I owe myself peace. If you're going through something similar, it's okay to walk away without a fight, without insults, without a scene. You can simply stop being someone's insurance policy. Lila posted it to her business page and tagged my company with a note about character. I didn't read the comments. I went back to work. The rumors dried up not because of clapback, but because sunlight makes mold retreat. Meanwhile, the Austin-Marissa reunion, round 2 of their old story, lost its gloss. A mutual friend of a friend, Jess, mentioned in passing that Austin had pitched a brand partnership, using Marissa's photography without offering to pay her. Old patterns reappeared. Big talk, small follow-through. She'd traded certainty for nostalgia, and nostalgia isn't a currency you can spend on rent. 2 months after my video, I passed Marissa at a farmer's market. She looked like a person who hadn't slept. I nodded. She nodded back. Neither of us stopped. That, too, was a kind of ending. But the most important ending was the one I hadn't written yet. The part that turned my quiet boundary into a measured, undeniable revenge. Not revenge to hurt. Revenge to close. It arrived by certified mail. I don't post screenshots. I don't weaponize secrets. My revenge wouldn't be spectacle. It would be finality, a set of actions that made backtracking impossible, not because I said so, but because the world now fit a different shape. Step 1. The house. Before the engagement imploded, Marissa and I had toured a small craftsman with a sagging porch and maple floors begging for a second life. She loved the light. I loved the bones. After everything, I drove by on a whim and saw the seller had dropped the price. I ran the numbers. It was tight, but doable if I moved fast. I bought it, not as a memory, but as a new foundation. I restored the porch. I sanded the floors. I turned the sunroom she adored into a design studio with a permanent for lease placard out front. That placard mattered. It said, to anyone who squinted at our old story, This is not yours anymore, even in your imagination. Step 2. The scholarship. I set up a small annual grant through the community college, the Whitaker Trade Scholarship, funding toolkits for students in carpentry and electrical. On the application form, a line read, "Tell us about a time you chose integrity when convenience was easier." The first year, a young woman named Alyssa wrote about leaving a relationship that kept her small. I handed her a set of chisels at the award ceremony and felt something thousands of apologies never give you. Forward motion. Step 3. The legal bow. Claire drafted a neat settlement proposal for the smear incident. Nothing dramatic, no money changing hands. It simply required both parties to acknowledge, in writing, that the statements about my business had been untrue and to agree not to discuss our private relationship publicly again. It wasn't posted anywhere. It wasn't meant for likes. It sat in a folder labeled closure and signed in 2 different inks. When Marissa saw it, she balked. When Austin saw it, he called it overkill. Claire said, "Or we could proceed." They signed. Step 4. The invitation not sent. Weddings mean guest lists, so do endings. I wrote letters, real paper, blue ink, to the 5 people whose opinions I'd let twist me up during the split. My mother Elaine, my cousin Dylan, the venue manager who checked in, an old neighbor who repeated gossip in the name of concern, and Noah, who'd stood by me the whole time. I thanked Noah. I told the others, in careful, human language, why their quick judgments had stung and where my boundary now lived. I didn't mail 4 of the letters. I burned them on the new house's back steps in a little tin pan and watched the smoke thread into the evening, saying it was the point, not being heard. The only one I mailed was to my mom. She called 3 days later, crying, apologizing, telling me she was proud. That phone call ended a fight I hadn't realized my family started 20 years ago. One where I'd always been the peacemaker, that's fine guy. It wasn't fine. It was better. People assumed strong revenge from the husband means grand reveals, public humiliations, a dozen phones filming. Mine was stronger. It removed the stage. No audience. No applause. Just a life built so square that anyone trying to lean their old story against it slid off. And then there was Nora. I met Nora Bennett at a supply warehouse buying trim. She was an interior architect who sketched on napkins and asked workers their names. She teased me about comparing crown profiles to poetry. I teased her about using a carpenter's pencil behind her ear like it was jewelry. We ran into each other again at the inspector's office, then at a coffee truck, then, because sometimes the universe stops hinting and speaks plainly, I found an email from her asking if I'd quote a build-out for a small nonprofit she designed. We worked well together in the way you dream about on long, lonely nights. Easy, respectful, with the slow burn of 2 people who know how to show up. I told Nora, early and clearly, about the year behind me. She didn't flinch. "I don't need headlines," she said. "I need habits." She asked about my mornings, my work, what I did when I got angry. I told her I ran by the river and counted my breath. She smiled. "Good. Let's count better things." We didn't rush. We didn't post. We cooked on Fridays, walked on Sundays, and said the quiet parts out loud. One evening, months into that simple rhythm, my phone buzzed with a number I still recognized from muscle memory. I let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail once, then deleted it. There was nothing unkind in the message, just the tale of the story finally running out of road. The next weekend, I finished the maple floors and moved a battered sofa into the Craftsman. I opened the windows and let the place breathe. Nora brought muffins, the good kind that pretend to be healthy and taste like Saturday. We sat on the floor, backs against the wall, and I told her something I'd been trying to name all year. It wasn't just losing her, I said. It was losing the person I was when I thought I was chosen. Nora touched my shoulder. "You weren't chosen," she said softly. "You were selected as a maybe. You chose yourself as a yes. That's better." I believed her. Here's the part people always ask for. The final confrontation, the scene where the past and the present stand in the same room and someone drops a glass. It didn't happen that way. The last door closed with the sound of a stamp in a courthouse and the scratch of a pen in a coffee shop. The stamp belonged to the clerk who filed the settlement acknowledgement. No fanfare, just an official seal and a document that rendered future gossip not worth the trouble. The scratch belonged to me, signing a 1-year lease to the Sunroom Studio in the Craftsman to a young photographer named Ray, who reminded me of a version of Marissa that might have existed in a better story. Talented, kind, hungry, and honest. When Ray toured the studio, she said, "It feels safe in here." I told her that was the point. Rooms, like hearts, should be both open and strong. A few days later, I ran into Megan, Marissa's sister, outside a grocery store. She hesitated, then said, "I know it's none of my business, but I'm sorry for the trouble we caused." We stood by the citrus bin and talked for 5 honest minutes. She said Marissa was moving. New apartment, new projects, new quiet. I wished her well because I meant it. Some evenings, I catch myself hoping she learns to stop looking backward for things that only grow forward. As for Austin, he drifted back into what he'd always been, loud around the edges and smaller at the center. Last I heard, he moved states for a contract that didn't last. That's not my story. That's weather in another town. My story looks like this. A life with fewer spectators and more handshakes. A house that creaks in the good ways. A woman who sits on the porch steps with me and talks about how sunlight bends. A calendar with open squares that mean possibility, not absence. I still wake early. I still run the river. I still measure twice and cut once. In wood and in promises. If you're reading because you want a high-stakes drama, here's the drama. Refusing to be anyone's second choice even when your chest aches for the first version of your future. If you want revenge, here's the revenge. Doing the kind, boring, powerful things that make your life so solid no rumor can find a stud. And if you want closure, here's the last paragraph. Months after the settlement, I received a final envelope. Inside was a single page from Marissa. No flourishes, no excuses. "I'm sorry," it said, in her neat print. "You were right about doors. I hope the ones you build now open to good rooms." It wasn't absolution, but it was a hinge greased. I put in the folder labeled closure, not because I needed the paper, but because I liked the title. That night, Nora and I ate on the porch. The maple leaves made lake sounds, even though there's no lake within 10 miles. She asked me what I wanted next. Not tomorrow, not next year, but next hour. I thought about all the versions of me that would have said, "I don't know," to keep the peace. I set down my fork and told the truth. "Another chair," I said, "for whoever we're becoming." She smiled. "I'll draw it," she said, already sketching the outline in the air. We carried the plates inside, washed them, turned off lights, and locked a door that stayed locked, not out of fear, but out of confidence. Outside, the house kept its shape. Inside, so did I.